Hi, I'm Louise Fisher from OTGrow and welcome to our YouTube channel. So if groups is a passion for you or a calling, then at our YouTube channel, we talk about tips, tools, and techniques around being an effective group facilitator. And today we are going to welcome Rolyn du Plessis, who is the guru on mindfulness in OT. Welcome, Rolyn.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, so you and I together we developed the Refining Gold mindfulness program that we ran through OTGrow. So I thought it would be great for people just to understand kind of where it was born from, how come we got together and presented this course. So yeah, maybe you can explain a little bit.
Okay. Well, mindfulness has become very popular in therapy in all spheres for use in pain and even weight loss and for anxiety and depression. So, occupational therapists have started using it all over. And I noticed in the facilities where I had contact with therapists in groups that they were using it sometimes just sort of as a beginning or an end to a group. So almost like this add-on technique. Or sometimes they were teaching people some theory about what mindfulness was, but they weren't actually allowing clients to practice mindfulness or really get an embodied sense of what mindfulness was all about and to really feel in their bodies the value that it had. But I never got the sense that using groups and mindfulness together, that it was really integrated with each other, that they were using mindfulness sort of as part of their groups in a seamless way. It was always sort of this add-on, or it was this theoretical kind of thing. Or when they did teach it, they taught the techniques as such, but outside of a group session.
Mm.
And it just felt to me like the two could actually enrich each other if they were used well together.
Mm. Yeah, I think at that stage, I think you reached out to me. I think it was also close, or just, I can't remember if it's just before, just after you attended the basic experiential of OTGrow as well. So I
Mm.
wondered, without giving details about your experience, but kind of what were the experiences that made you think, okay, wait, yeah, we've got something that can be quite special.
Hmm. Well, I think the one thing definitely was that you mentioned how groups, the focus of groups have shifted a lot to focus on the here and the now,
Mm.
which is really the core of mindfulness as well. So I thought, well, that is one way to really help people to get into the here and now if you know how to incorporate mindfulness and to stay in the here and the now, I think. Um, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what else. Let me think. Um, you'll have to edit this out, Louise. Um, I wonder. I think some of the principles just felt like they resonated with each other. So mindfulness has this idea that there is suffering, and in groups we say there are these existential factors. That is life. That's how life is. And so there were things that I felt resonated with each other. Some of the things that we are trying to facilitate in groups just felt to me like this is just like mindfulness, or mindfulness. If people know mindfulness, or you can use some of those techniques, it would really help people with through the group process, and um, it would contribute some of the qualities that we actually are trying to facilitate. I'm struggling to actually put it properly on words, but it felt like something of the quality would be enhanced if you had this element of mindfulness added.
Yeah, I think maybe just to come in here a bit, Rulana, I agree with you that I think there's so many techniques and I mean mindfulness, DBT, a lot of them, that it feels the emphasis is on that, and that it's either I get to choose DBT or I do the interactive group model.
Mm,
Either I'm going to explain things in detail, and you know, there's a lot of teaching that goes around with that, or I'm going to do the experiential group.
mm,
And there seems to be a missing link of we can actually do both. You know, I use the metaphor of the Russian dolls. You know, the one can be
Hmm.
inside of the other. So we can do both. We can hold both. We don't have to make a choice.
Hmm.
But I think what you were saying, that is so two key things with the interactive group model that I think just absolutely resonates with mindfulness is the here and now. Um,
Hmm.
and I think it comes back to that thing of we can talk about the here and now, or we can be in the here and now, and how
Exactly.
different that is. Sometimes when somebody's crying in the group, to sit with that is sometimes difficult. It's that there is suffering, allow suffering. We don't need to fix it. We are here in the here and now instead of talking about it. I don't know.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm thinking of while you say that is this idea of mindfulness to experience how or to learn how I can be with difficulty and just allow things to be as they are. That's really a core element, accepting things as they are, not judging them, having patience with the process, trusting that things will be okay. All
Mm,
of those attitudes of mindfulness really help us to build this container for just being with things, even when they are really difficult. And it helps us, I think, also um, to expand our own tolerance for being with those difficulties when they do arise in our lives.
mm.
Mm,
And then I think there's real seamless integration. You know,
yeah.
I think that's what you and I were both really striving for, that it's not, let's talk about sitting with discomfort. But now here in the group is discomfort. And now let's facilitate just sitting with this. Don't need to change it. Um, it's very different. And I think that brings me to the second point I wanted to make, and that's that absolute embodiment, that it's not
Mm,
a knowledge thing, that it's not something I can name up for you, but it's something
mm.
that in this moment, to have generosity of spirit when I actually maybe not feel like it, or, to have that non-judging, or to be made aware of the fact that I'm judging, and to be helped or facilitated in this moment for possibly bringing curiosity on board when mind or when judgment rears its head within a group process.
Yeah, the embodiment is so important in mindfulness, and I agree absolutely. I think it's you that said often that having the right knowledge doesn't change behavior. It's doing something different, practicing, experiencing in your body something different that will actually change behavior. Otherwise, all of us with all the knowledge would have had perfect lives, isn't it? So,
That's
really experiencing that embodied sense of, oh, but I'm really struggling here. And then sort of getting a bit of frustration and then suddenly noticing a shift or noticing that if I do something different, my whole experience changes. Um, that really makes that is where the change is.
mm. Yeah, and I think that's I think there's also you can have knowledge, but then you to know what to do with that knowledge. And I think that's what we're trying to incorporate for occupational therapists. You can have the group process, but how do I interweave this mindfulness attitudes and techniques and the inquiry and all of that? How do I do that in the here and now, in this very moment? When
That's right.
somebody is struggling with something.
Did our course was that we had all the techniques, but then bringing those techniques and the theory into the group session and to see how you can embed that, how that can inform your group sessions, I think was found very helpful. I remember one of our to say that she knew the theory beforehand, but having it within the group setting really made a deeper impact, that she had experienced the theory suddenly on a deeper level because she could integrate it in the group session. So I think that made a big difference.
Yeah, I also think so. And I almost saw that not only with her feedback, but how people kind of worked with the themes. It wasn't now I've got the knowledge. It's like, a week later, now I get this, what we've been saying about generosity. And, she'd been on a couple of courses of mindfulness or whatever, but it was through the actual activity and seeing her own response. I can
Yeah.
think I'm a very generous person, but then through this activity, I realize, oh my goodness, maybe I'm not as generous. Or what is it in this moment that's making me hold on instead of having a generous a heart or whatever, then you almost kind of really get that feedback and become more aware. And with that awareness, you're processing on a deeper level.
Yeah, now what I really liked as well is how, because we put it in the group, it translated back again into people's everyday lives. So I was actually surprised how people came back and said, "Oh, but I realize now in my everyday life, this and this happened." And suddenly I was more aware of this aspect in myself, and I managed to actually make a shift even in my everyday life. So I think if we can, or this is the power, I think, of putting mindfulness and interactive group model together, then you are able to actually translate those skills back into your everyday life because you become more aware of it in your everyday life as well.
That's right. So
Mm.
so the activity becomes the mirror, which then you are aware of, so you can make changes or become more aware, which you then take back to society.
Mm.
And that is called in the interactive group model. Because often we
Exactly.
have this warped sense of who we are, or how generous we are, or how non-judgmental. And then when we are confronted with it in activity, we realize, oops, oh, okay. And then
Yeah.
it allows us to become more or have a truer reflection. Let's rather not say warped. Let's say
Mm.
a more
Mm.
true reflection of what am I really like, and that then helps for taking it back into my family and my daily life.
Yeah, and I think what's lovely about mindfulness is the kindness that is there, that there's sort of this core belief that at our truest, in our truest nature,
Mm.
we are good, we are generous, we are patient, we are kind. And to actually get that feedback that there are some things that are actually masking that, that's actually hiding those aspects,
Mm.
um, and bringing in this idea that you can actually just drop that story.
Mm.
And really sort of allow the truest version of yourself to come to the fore. And I think if you can actually experience that part of yourself, um,
Yeah,
that sense of true self in a group,
yeah.
then you're much more likely to go and try and embody that again in your everyday life. So I love that about mindfulness and how it plays into the interactive group model, that you get a sense not just of, oh, what's wrong with me, but what's right with me and what are my
Mm.
truest qualities, and that I can let go and drop those stories that I have about myself that maybe I'm not a generous person, or maybe there isn't enough, so I have to cling to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that is where the cohesion plays such a big role, because here I feel accepted enough to let go of that
yeah,
story. So it's almost if once I feel accepted, I can take the risk of dropping that. And the more I drop it, actually, the more I'm liberated by that dropping. But without that cohesion or without that feedback from other people, it actually becomes quite a inner journey that is, I think, tougher. Because if
that's
nine
right.
people are like, we like you, you're cool, and you don't have to give the story. We like you whether you've got the story or not.
Yeah,
It does something. It creates this real sense of belonging that I think enables people to drop, which I think is what families should do. But I think we just know that there are so many things happening in families today, and this is almost, I think Yalom calls it a restructuring of the family, a substitute family that
that's
enables
right.
that quality to come out.
That's right. And I think that's how the interactive group model again supports mindfulness, because you can practice mindfulness on your own at home, just do the practices. But it's much more difficult. You're absolutely right to get, sort of let go of the stickiness of those stories. But when you hear it from the outside and you're suddenly challenging those stories, and you don't have to sort of work so hard on the inside to let go of them and convince yourself otherwise, it's just much easier to just believe what you're seeing and that's being reflected to you from the outside. In that sense, I really believe that doing mindfulness within a group setting just makes it so much easier. I so totally agree with you.
Mm. I think the one point I want to circle back to, the one thing that I found through the Refining Gold program that I needed to become so much more aware of was the tentative talk that
Mm,
is part of mindfulness. Because in the interactive group model, that's not, I want to say, characteristic of it. And so knowing that when you're bringing in mindfulness, you're actually coming in with a specific approach that is
mm,
not almost that's exclusively mindfulness. So if we want to bring it in to the interactive group model, then it's to make sure it's not just that I'm bringing in techniques or using activities to reach certain of the attitudes or whatever, but I need
mm.
to change a little bit my approach to really fit in with the mindfulness philosophy, if I can put it that way. So it
Yeah.
was a learning curve for me, talking about maybe would you like, normally I give instructions, or I would say, can I challenge you? And you would say, can we perhaps invite you? And so that was quite a learning curve to, and I think that's something else maybe we can just put a bit of emphasis on. I'd like to hear your take on it, of
Mm,
how often it's, I'll teach you about mindfulness, but I'm not embodying
mm.
mindfulness in this therapeutic approach that I'm taking.
Hmm. I think that's really important. And I think this is why the theoretical aspect, or understanding really the theory that mindfulness techniques are embedded in, and also the ethics actually, is so important. It's not just a set of techniques
Mm,
that we are teaching people. It's really a whole, almost a way of being that you are trying to teach and embody in a way.
mm,
So the approach, well, one of the big aspects is not that we don't just want to teach people how to embody, we want to embody mindfulness actually. So we want to, as therapists, to be accepting, to have patience, to allow things to be as they are, to let go of things, to not strive towards all these specific therapeutic goals necessarily. And in mindfulness, definitely allowing for choice is very important, especially from a trauma sensitive perspective. So, not saying what I want you to do is, or, as you say, giving instructions. It's a gentler approach. There's a big sense of not forcing, but rather inviting.
mm,
Um, and I think the idea behind it is this idea that you cannot open a flower with a hammer. This is the idea that there's an invitation of warmth. And there's this lovely poem that I always think of when I talk about this, that a flower opens when there's warmth and sunlight.
mm,
It doesn't open when you try to force it. And in fact, when you force it, you actually do harm. So
mm,
mindfulness really has this gentle, kind, warm, inviting, allowing approach that I think when we allow mindfulness to inform our groups, we should really embody that if we want to really integrate the two very well.
mm. I think there's one other thing that I think I've been not grappling with, but I'd like to hear your opinion on it. And this is a lot of kindness. And I think sometimes what I'm seeing is the imbalance with therapists of very centered around other people, almost to the detriment of self. And I'm
Mm,
wondering, the kindness, how do you see the kindness that can hold both? The kindness of
mm,
mindfulness that holds both. Because I think otherwise it's so easy for therapists to say, well, you see, or it's easy, I'm already kind, I'm already thinking of that person. But I think there's something about a kindness to self. But I wanted, yeah, just to hear your perspective on that.
mm. I was actually reading something this morning. So I think that the difficult part to understand is there's this idea in mindfulness about not one and not two. So it's not the one or the other. Um, but they also, the two things aren't one thing, but it's actually both. So there's this, I think the balance is to realize that I'm a therapist, I'm a human being. I require as much self-kindness, self-compassion, and that sometimes means setting strict and firm boundaries. It sometimes means not tolerating certain behaviors. There's also this, I have to be kind toward my group members and not um, allow one person to cause harm. So I think that one of the big things is understanding that the core of mindfulness is to relieve suffering. I think that's really always it's sort of the heartbeat.
Mm,
Um, and the suffering shouldn't be caused to either yourself or any of your group members.
mm,
Um, and it's not an easy thing to balance, I think. But if that is sort of the thing that you bear in mind, that the core of mindfulness is how do I relieve suffering?
mm,
And that includes my own suffering.
mm,
And that doesn't just mean the soft doormat approach. Sometimes kindness is very firm.
mm,
It's like being a good parent. If you're just saying to your child, oh, it's okay, everything's fine, and you're just soft and gentle,
mm,
and you have no strict boundaries or discipline, you're doing harm to your child. You're not teaching your child the truth about how life is. So I think it's a similar balance that what is kind isn't always necessarily soft. It
mm,
can sometimes be firm. I think there's a big aspect of being truthful. So coming to the reality of things, because we can sort of soften things up and make them feel nice. Mindfulness is not about making people feel nice. It's about facing the reality of things. And I think this is the part of mindfulness. It's really important that we want to get into contact with the reality of how things truly are. Sometimes that's very difficult. Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it requires a firmness and courage,
mm,
sitting with a lot of difficulty, facing the reality of this is what I've been doing. So I don't think people should confuse kindness with just allowing
mm,
whatever to the detriment of the process or the person. Kindness can sometimes have a bit of a harsh face as well.
mm.
But it has the intention is to relieve the suffering.
And I really like that because I think one of the not tricks, one of the things that I think is challenging in the interactive group model is holding the group and myself. And
Yeah.
often there's the tension, and how do I do both? Because we know that in societies it's exactly that. It's not the one or the other. It's at
Mm.
any stage, can I hold both?
Yeah.
And that is a skill that I think very few people actually have. But I think that's also what you're saying. So when we facilitate feedback to somebody from the group to say, your behavior impacts me this way, it's again that bringing the reality, the truth, so that the other person can become aware of what's happening. But yeah, so I just love that. I didn't kind of put the two together as another aspect where mindfulness and the interactive group model can just seamlessly be interwoven with each other.
Yeah, and I think that the important part of that, what you're saying is it's important that the therapist be able to do that. So I think, and that is always for me, working in psych, that is the core thing, that you have to do your own work,
Yeah.
because you are bringing all of yourself into that session. So if you're not embodying mindfulness, if you want to use mindfulness, you should be able to do your own mindfulness practice, work with your own stuff as well, exactly for that reason, so that you can embody that. And so that you can say, well, I'm aware of my experience, and that you can also skillfully work with that to know when is it wise to say what my experience is, when is it wise to just contain it and hold it and focus there. Um, it's really a very skilled thing, but I think learning that skill starts with doing your own work. I think that's really, really important. Mm.
Yeah, I agree on all levels, in terms of the mindfulness attitudes, but also in terms of being brave enough to really do your own work, to become aware, to ask for feedback.
Mm.
That's also core for OTGrow, great therapists are self-aware therapists and are
Yeah.
not afraid to do the work. Um,
Mm.
yeah. Oh, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Relaine. I really appreciate yeah, it's sharing your thoughts with us. So maybe just for our listeners to say that if you are piqued by what we've been discussing or you're interested, you'll be happy to know that next year in August and September, we're also going to be running the Refining Gold Mindfulness program again for those of you that want to become skilled and experts at seamlessly integrating the two approaches. So until then, we hope to see you at the program. But until then, happy facilitating.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Louise.